You go out to check the tomatoes in the first week of August, and something's wrong. One fruit has split wide open right on the vine, like the skin just gave up and gave way. Another one looks fine at a glance, until you turn it and see rings cracking around the top where it meets the stem, like a leather ball that's been left out too long. And there's a third one you almost don't want to touch, blackened and sunken on the underside, rotting from the inside before it's even ripe. 3 different tomatoes. 3 different problems. And if you've looked any of this up, you've probably gotten 3 different fixes, none of which actually worked, because they're all treating the symptom and missing what's happening underground. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why all 3 of these show up on the same plants, in the same week, almost like clockwork every August, and the fix takes 10 minutes and costs almost nothing. It isn't the one on the seed packet. It isn't the one your neighbor swears by. It's not even the one most garden blogs will tell you. Stick around, because the real cause is a lot simpler than anyone's making it sound. And once you see it, you'll never look at a cracked tomato the same way again. This is the one everyone recognizes immediately. A tomato that looked perfect the day before now has a long crack running straight down from the stem toward the bottom, sometimes deep enough to see the flesh underneath. Look at this close-up right here. You can actually see how deep that split runs, straight down from the stem. Most advice blames this on rain. Too much water all at once, right when the fruit is nearly ripe. And that's not wrong exactly, but it's not the whole story either, because plenty of gardeners get a heavy rainfall in July and never see a single split, while other years a much smaller rain event splits half the crop. If it were really just about the total amount of water, the pattern would be a lot more predictable than it actually is. Something else is setting the fruit up to fail before that rain ever falls, and we'll get to what that is. This one gets confused with splitting constantly, but it's a different injury with a different shape. Instead of one long crack from the stem, you get a web of shallow rings circling the shoulder of the fruit, sometimes just a few, sometimes so many the top looks almost cork-like. Growers usually chalk this up to variety. Heirlooms crack more than hybrids, thin-skinned types crack more than thick-skinned ones, and that part is true. But genetics only explains why some plants are more vulnerable. It doesn't explain why a variety that cracked heavily last year might barely crack at all this year in the exact same bed. Whatever is triggering, it isn't fixed in the plant's DNA. It's something happening to the plant, season by season, and often week by week. Of the 3, this is the one that scares people the most, because it doesn't look like a growing problem, it looks like a disease. A flat, sunken, leathery patch spreads across the bottom of the fruit, sometimes pale tan, sometimes almost black, and it keeps spreading even after you pick the tomato. Notice how the bottom of this one is completely black, while the healthy one right next to it looks totally normal. For decades, the standard explanation has been calcium deficiency, and that's technically true. The tissue at the blossom end really is short on calcium. But here's the part almost nobody mentions on the label of that calcium spray you bought. Soil tests on gardens with blossom end rot usually come back with plenty of calcium already in the soil. The plant isn't starving for calcium. It's failing to move the calcium it already has to the one part of the plant that needs it most. That's a very different problem, and it means most of the fixes people reach for first, more calcium, crushed eggshells, a spray bottle of dissolved Tums, aren't actually addressing what's wrong. So now you've got 3 separate looking problems. One is a physical crack from the stem, One is a web of shallow rings around the shoulder. One is a nutrient failure at the bottom of the fruit that shows up even in soil that has plenty of that nutrient to give. Different symptoms, different locations on the fruit, and yet they all tend to hit the same gardens in the same weeks. That's not a coincidence, and once you understand why, you'll realize you've been fighting one problem the entire time, not three. If you've dealt with any of these this season, drop which one hit your plants hardest in the comments: splitting, cracking, or blossom end rot, because the answer to all three is coming up right now. The real culprit here is what connects all three, and it starts with something most home gardeners never think about: how water actually moves through a tomato plant. Take a look at this for a second. Don't worry, we're not about to get into a botany lecture here. Just picture the whole plant as a bunch of tiny drinking straws, running from the roots all the way up to the leaves and the fruit. Water travels up through those straws, and it's not just water, it's carrying dissolved minerals along for the ride, calcium included. What pulls the water up in the first place is the leaves. They're constantly losing moisture to the air, and that loss creates suction, the same way sipping through a straw pulls liquid up from the bottom of a glass. Leaves do a lot of that sipping. Fruit barely sips at all. So in a plant loaded down with leaves and a heavy crop of tomatoes, the water and the calcium riding inside it gets pulled toward the leaves first, and the fruit gets whatever's left over. Under steady, consistent soil moisture, that's not really a problem. There's enough flow to go around, and fruit gets a reliable trickle of calcium even while losing the competition to the leaves. But the moment soil moisture becomes inconsistent, dry for several days, then suddenly soaked, that flow doesn't just slow down evenly across the plant. It stutters. And when it stutters, the fruit is the first place to feel it, because fruit was already getting the short end of the water supply even in good conditions. That inconsistent flow is also exactly what causes splitting and cracking. During a dry stretch, the fruit's outer skin toughens up and slows its own growth to match the limited water coming in. Then a heavy rain or a big watering session hits, and the roots suddenly have far more water available than they did an hour earlier. The interior of the fruit, which is mostly water by weight, absorbs that surge fast. The skin, already toughened from the dry spell, can't stretch quickly enough to keep up. Something has to give, and it splits or cracks along whatever line of weakness the fruit already has, straight down from the stem if the pressure builds fastest there, or in rings around the shoulder if the growth stress spreads out instead. Same root cause. 3 different failure points on the fruit, depending on exactly how the water surge hits and how the plant's calcium delivery was already running behind. Splitting, cracking, and blossom end rot aren't 3 separate diseases. They're 3 different symptoms of the same underlying event, a swing between dry soil and wet soil that the plant couldn't buffer fast enough to keep the fruit intact. Why this happens specifically in August, this isn't random timing either. A few things stack up in August that make this exact swing far more likely than it is in June. First, by August, most tomato plants are carrying their heaviest fruit load of the season. Early fruit set in June and July is now ripening in bulk, which means there's more total fruit competing for calcium at exactly the moment the plant's water demand is highest. Second, August heat cranks up how fast leaves lose water to the air, that same sipping effect we just talked about. Leaves lose water a lot faster in 90-degree heat than they do in 70-degree heat, and that pulls even harder on whatever water is available, leaving fruit even further behind in that competition. Third, August is when afternoon thunderstorms become more common in a lot of regions. Exactly the kind of sudden, heavy rain that follows a hot, dry stretch and creates the surge that splits fruit that was already stressed. And fourth, honestly, August is when a lot of gardeners' watering habits slip. The excitement of spring planting has worn off. Vacations happen. The heat makes standing outside with a hose less appealing, and established plants start to look like they don't need daily attention anymore. All of that adds up to soil moisture that swings harder and more often in August than at any other point in the growing season, right when the plant is least equipped to absorb that swing without damaging the fruit. The 10-minute fix. So here's the part that actually matters. Not eggshells, not calcium spray, not ripping out the variety you love because it cracks too much. The fix is to stop the swing, and you can set that up in about 10 minutes. Here's exactly what that looks like. Step 1. Mulch. Lay 2 to 3 inches of straw, shredded leaves, or untreated grass clippings around the base of every tomato plant, right out to the drip line. This is the single biggest lever you have, because mulch slows evaporation from the soil surface, which means the soil underneath stays at a more even moisture level between waterings, instead of swinging from bone dry to soaked. This alone takes about 5 minutes per plant, and it's the difference most gardeners are missing entirely. Step 2. Water deeply and on a schedule instead of shallow and on impulse. 1 to 1.5 inches of water, roughly, once or twice a week depending on your heat and soil type, delivered slowly enough to soak down 6 to 8 inches rather than just wetting the surface. A soaker hose or drip line left running for 30 to 45 minutes does this without you standing there. And if you're worried about remembering, a cheap mechanical timer on the spigot handles that for you. Deep, infrequent watering trains roots to grow down where moisture is more stable, instead of staying shallow and dependent on whatever hit the surface most recently. Step 3. Check the soil before you add more water, not the leaves. Wilting leaves in the heat of a summer afternoon are often just the plant protecting itself from moisture loss, not a sign it's thirsty. And watering reactively every time leaves droop is one of the fastest ways to create the exact swing that's splitting your fruit. Stick a finger 2 inches into the soil near the root zone. If it's still damp, leave it alone. Step 4. Ease off nitrogen-heavy fertilizer once fruit starts setting. Excess nitrogen pushes the plant toward more leafy growth, and more leaves means more of that sipping action pulling water and calcium away from the fruit, which makes the whole competition worse at the exact time the fruit needs to be winning it. Switch to a fertilizer lower in nitrogen and more balanced in phosphorus and potassium once the first flowers appear. That's the entire fix. Mulch, a consistent deep watering schedule, checking soil instead of leaves, and backing off nitrogen once fruit sets. No spray bottles, no soil amendments you have to reapply every week. Nothing that costs more than what's probably already sitting in your yard or your garage. The eggshells and the calcium sprays aren't wrong because calcium doesn't matter. They're wrong because they're solving a supply problem that your soil almost certainly doesn't have, while ignoring the delivery problem that's actually causing all 3 symptoms you've been fighting. If you've already got fruit showing symptoms this season, you can't undo the damage on those specific tomatoes, but stabilizing moisture right now protects everything that's still developing. And most gardeners see a sharp drop in new splitting and blossom end rot within about 2 weeks of getting the watering consistent. Tell me in the comments which symptom hit your garden hardest this year, and whether your watering routine looks anything like what we just walked through. If this finally explained something that's been bugging you all season, subscribe to Green Acres. New practical, Myth-free gardening videos go up every week.